Today we're chatting to Andrew Tilley, Associate Lecturer at Murdoch University, teaching in the fields of food science and product development. As an active member of the Australian Institute of Food Science and Technology, he has worked in a variety of roles in the food industry, including research, quality assurance, sensory and product development. Welcome, Andrew. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Hi, Maria. Thanks for having me.
Could you tell me a little bit about your work and what you specialise in?
Sure. So at the moment, I'm an associate lecturer at Murdoch University, teaching in our food science and nutrition undergraduate program. And I guess my role here at Murdoch is one, to be a lecturer, but also to work with local businesses and national businesses on food research projects. So at the moment, I'm completing a PhD working with a local artichoke grower, and we're looking at bioactive components of his products and then potentially some value-add options that might come about from his product. From the teaching perspective, we're trying to teach our students to be nutritionists that can go on to do dietetics, but also give them a strong foundation in food science, product development, and how a food factory might work and its operations.
That's wonderful, Andrew. Could you tell me what were you looking for in your search for a freeze dryer?
Yeah, so we've got some lab-based freeze dryers on campus, but we're really looking for a food-based or food-focused freeze dryer that we can use to teach the students the fundamentals of freeze drying and then all the underlying physics and engineering concepts that go along with freeze drying. So we're looking for something that's food focused and we could dedicate to food production in our dedicated kitchen space, so we didn't have to worry about contamination.
Can you talk about any specific challenges that you had prior to adopting the CD8?
Yeah, so I guess some of the challenges we had was we were trying to teach students these concepts in our kitchen space, and when we wanted to show them a freeze dryer, we would then have to go to one of the research labs outside and then try and show them what would happen to food in those when we put it through a freeze dryer. The problem we were finding was, one, we had to go use a lab-based freeze dryer, so there was issues with booking time on it. We couldn't consume the food after it being processed, and the freeze dryers were fairly inflexible in setting parameters to control the freeze drying process.
What made you choose our CD8 over any other freeze dryer?
So again, yeah, we're looking, trying to find something that might be suitable for our space that we're working in. And I guess the things that stood out for the CD8 was, one, it was a benchtop model, still had a relatively high capacity, had a relatively small footprint because we're in quite a small space, and it also offered a lot of flexibility in adjusting the freeze drying parameters, so we could teach the students what happens when you adjust certain aspects of it and what the outcome is on food product quality.
That's great. Having said that, what are the three benefits that you've experienced as a result of deploying the CD8 freeze dryer?
I guess there's been a couple of key ones that have really stood out to me. One, we're getting a lot more student engagement. So students are really fascinated by the concept of freeze drying because it's quite novel. It's not something that most people come across in their day-to-day lives. So it's also allowing us to introduce concepts like drying and freezing, and then combine them together and show them a practical application of it. So it's really increasing their depth of understanding of all those concepts as well as freeze drying as a process. So we're getting more engagement, a deeper level of education with the students, and also a lot more opportunity for them to show their creativity. So at the moment, because we've just started, we're essentially saying to students, if there's something you'd like to try freeze drying and see what happens to it, just put your hand up and we'll organise it. And so we've been just putting a whole lot of different food products through the freeze dryer so that they can get an idea of what happens to foods when they go through that process and what sort of products work really well and what work a little bit not quite as well. We're also on a side note, finding that we have a lot less food waste. So generally after a practical in class, if there's any leftover product, the students will say, let's freeze dry it, we'll put it in, freeze it, and we've then got a shelf-stable ingredient that they can then experiment with, take home, or do whatever they want with.
Isn't that great? I mean, it's one thing having the theoretical knowledge of how freeze drying works, but when you have that practical side of using the machine and seeing the results of what the food comes out like and what, samples are like after they've gone through that sublimation process, it's quite a good experience for your students, I'd imagine. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not something that is always available for students. It's giving them a lot of opportunity to investigate something that you often just hear about, but you don't get to actually practice yourself.
That's great. And having said that, what is life like now that you've experienced the CD8 freeze dryer?
Well, it's great. We're definitely using it quite often. So on one hand, I've actually increased my understanding of the freeze drying process quite significantly, having to set up and learn how the equipment works. And that in turn is letting me teach the students a lot better about the principles underlying it and the specifics of freeze drying. So it's really improved the educational experience for our students. It's been really positive.
So what are some of the features that are most useful for you that the CD8 freeze dryer offers?
So I guess, first of all, the high capacity for a benchtop model is letting us trial a lot of different things and fulfill the capacity requirements for our class. The high flexibility as well of the parameters that you can set is really positive. So normally with the lab-based ones, we're finding that it's just turn it on, set it and forget. And you have one process and you get one outcome. With the CD8, we're finding that with the high flexibility in setting up programs with different pressure and temperature combinations, it's really letting us explore how variations in the parameters affect food quality and gives the students a lot better insight into what actually is happening and what impacts food quality when it's going through the freeze drying process.
I'm really pleased to hear that you're having some really good experiences with the freeze dryer. If you were to recommend this freeze dryer to a friend, what would you say?
I think I'd definitely just recommend, from a food processing perspective, it's very flexible and it's allowing you to freeze dry in a very efficient manner. So a lot of those lab-based ones where there's no flexibility in the parameters, your drying process is very static in a sense, whereas with the flexibility that comes with changing the temperature and pressure and time, it's allowing for a more efficient drying process, making it a little bit more economical from a food perspective.
So Andrew, what would you say entails for the future moving forward now using the CD8 freeze dryer?
Thanks. I guess what we're hoping is, one, we'll become more familiar with it ourselves for our teaching and continue to engage our students in learning how freeze drying works and continue to educate them on the underlying principles of it. But we're also hoping to engage with local businesses who might be looking to explore freeze drying as a process to incorporate into their business. So one of the challenges in WA is that there's not a lot of capacity with equipment. So what we're hoping is, if we can partner with local businesses to show them how freeze drying works, allow them to trial new products through it, it's got the potential to, one, engage students with local businesses, which gives them industry experience, and also helps to promote the local food industry in WA.
It's really good that you speak about that, Andrew, because of the lack of knowledge of freeze drying out there, not many people are aware of the benefits that you can provide by, extending the shelf life of food and retaining all of its value, nutritional value, and and flavor. So and there's a lot of food manufacturers out there that obviously aren't aware, and particularly in a day and age now where a lot of people are looking for alternatives to preservative packed foods that we have out there on the shelves. That we can provide much more of a better option when it comes to quick food that have a long shelf life.
Yeah, 100%. I think freeze drying in general is quite a high capital outlay initially for businesses, and if they've got no experience in using that technology, they're very unlikely to take that risk of buying one without knowing what the products that can be made with it are. So hopefully we can bridge that gap and de-risk that product development process.
That's great, Andrew. Thank you so much, Andrew, for your time today. I really appreciate getting some insight on how the CD8 freeze dryer has helped you in your processes and your teaching there at Murdoch University in Perth.
Thanks, Maria. Really appreciate talking with you.